The people that claim that Trump is the worst president in our U.S. history prove that they know absolutely nothing about U.S. presidential history. Donald J. Trump. Trump is factually, statistically, and easily one of, if not the absolute best presidents in our U.S. history, especially in our recent history. And Biden is among the worst. Nope, those internet lists and lists alike put presidents like Obama and Biden high up, above Trump, Abe Lincoln high, and George Washington high. A complete joke list made by opinionated nobodies. Doesn't counter facts. Their answers alone proven them factually incorrect and moronic. There are only a few in all of U.S. history that even compare to Trump's greatness, and Trump's done more good for the U.S. and the average American both terms than any president has ever done. Did more both terms in his first year both times than any U.S. president has done even in a full 8-year term. Trump saved America. His achievements and good deeds are overwhelming. More and the rest of my takes on Donald Trump can be found in my article on Donald Trump, found on my page. U.S. Presidents: George W. Bush, Iraq War, Katrina handling, the Patriot Act, the 2008 financial crisis, damaging environmental policies, No Child Left Behind Act, tax cuts favoring wealthy, failure to capture Osama after 9/11, and human rights violations. He pushed to privatize Social Security. He was not a great president. George H.W. Bush. He largely ignored the AIDS pandemic, costing lives, burdened taxpayers, going back on promises, left Hussein in power sowing future conflict, deepened the early 90s recession impact, diverted attention from important U.S. needs, like infrastructure, set the stage for future economic instability by deregulating financial markets, seemed to disconnect with real struggling, in-need Americans. George H.W. Bush oversaw CIA during questionable covert operations. 2. Supported Iraq before Gulf War. 3. Slow response to AIDS crisis. 4. Vetoed Civil Rights Act of 1990. 5. Pardoned Iran-Contra scandal figures. 6. Pushed deregulations favoring corporations. 7. Handled recession of 1990 poorly. 8. Backed controversial Noriega in Panama. 9. Ignored domestic issues for foreign policy. 10. Raised taxes despite campaign promise. 11. Weak environmental protection efforts. Supported policies widening income inequality. 13. Failed to address urban decay. 14. Promoted war on drugs ineffectively. 15. Limited transparency in administration. 16. Bat Saudi interests over human rights. 17. Mishandled Tiananmen Square response. 18. Neglected veterans issues post-Gulf War. 19. Pushed NAFTA, harming American workers. 20. Alienated key voter bases, weakening party unity. Barack Obama. President Barack Obama seems like a cool guy, smooth talker with that easy charm, but as a leader, he was a disaster. Incompetent and deadly, leaving a trail of treasonous blunders, needless slaughter, and deep divisions that still haunt us. Let's break it down with the facts, no spin. Start with the body count overseas, especially among brown folks caught in his drone frenzy. Per the Council on Foreign Relations 2017 tally, Obama greenlit 542 drone strikes, 10 times more than Bush, over 8 years, killing over 3,000 people, including hundreds of civilians in Pakistan, Yemen, and Somalia alone, per Bureau of Investigative Journalism's data, with strikes often based on shaky intel that turned weddings into funerals. The Intercept's 2014 investigation revealed Obama's kill list approved strikes on teenagers and unnamed military-age males, slaughtering innocents without trial, a war crime vibe that Reuters' 2016 reports confirmed left villages in ruins, fueling ISIS recruitment instead of quelling it. Then there's Libya. Obama's 2011 bombing campaign toppled Gaddafi but unleashed chaos, with over 72,000 brown lives lost per UN estimates, turning a stable nation into a slave-trading hellhole where cartels and traffickers thrive, all because he ignored Congress for NATO fund, per Politico's 2020 retrospective calling it his worst decision. Syria? He drew a red line on chemical weapons, then did nothing when Assad gassed kids, allowing Russia to bomb Aleppo, killing tens of thousands more per Human Rights Watch, while his arms shipments to rebels ended up with jihadis, prolonging the slaughter, per BBC's 2024 retrospective on refugee flows exceeding 6 million. Although Obama promised to put on a pair of comfortable shoes and march with unions on strike, he completely ignored the unions fighting for their lives in Wisconsin and Ohio. He is responsible for the greatest decline of an American political party in all of history, with Democrats losing 900 state legislative seats, 70% of state legislatures, 2/3 of all governorships.
Obama worked to deliver for the 1%. The recovery under Obama was no recovery at all for working Americans. I could go on and on as to why Obama was one of the worst presidents we've ever had. He doesn't even have 5% on the greatness of Trump. Most of Trump's allegations and crimes are complete nonsense witch hunts, just attempts to smear his name. Meanwhile, Obama was literally ruining us. His liberal nutjob puppet agenda sparked racism and division of the American people like never seen before almost. Corrupt, criminal. Helped raise our debt more than any president in history. Began ruining us. He did a decent job, but nowhere near Trump. Nowhere near. He inherited military actions in 2 Muslim countries and extended U.S. military campaigns to bombing 7 different Muslim countries, and then bragged about it. He promised to close Guantanamo, and then didn't. He cut food stamps by $9 billion. He took the disastrous Bush tax cuts, which were due to expire, and made them permanent. He pushed to cut Social Security. He suspended habeas corpus, allowing the U.S. government to detain citizens at any time for as long as they want without having to charge them with a crime. He used the Espionage Act to jail journalists and whistleblowers, gifting Trump with a dangerous precedent to stifle free speech and the First Amendment. He promised to go after the crooks on Wall Street and then refused to prosecute them, even though his DOJ had at least 11 criminal referrals from Congress to do so. Obama was easily one of the worst presidents, especially in recent history. He is also the silent dictator of the past 13-plus years, not counting Trump. Biden and Kamala are his puppets. This sounds like conspiracy, but really it's fact. It's the Dem regime. It is like Obama intentionally tried to hurt us. Whole books wrote explaining facts about why he is easily one of the most terrible presidents we've ever had. Only Biden and Kamala would be worse. Try reading The Worst President in History, The Legacy of Barack Obama by Matt Margolis and Mark Noonan. I could go on similarly for days about Obama, but I think this point is proven. Obama? What would you like to compare? Obama deporting illegals on a much grander scale, a lot also without due process. A vast amount of immigrant children lost, killed, escorted in cages more than Trump. Millions more of innocent people, children killed by drone airstrikes appointed by him. Wars originating under his presidency versus working on ending adopted wars. Numerous false flag operations against political opponents, including the Russian hoax. And laptop from hell amongst much more. Obama openly hates and divides America, supports commie anti-American socialists, helped destroy, fell, and invade America, formed a coup, and more. While I admit I like Obama as a person, and I think he's a pretty cool good guy, he is not the leader we thought he was going to be. I was even for him in '08. Abraham Lincoln. Did you know Abe Lincoln actually was against most rights for blacks? He jailed many, many innocent people, paid off slavers, was sort of a dictator, started unnecessary conflicts, stopped free speech quite a few times by limiting what newspapers were allowed to release news, deported people who opposed him quite often, ditched habeas corpus, appointed incompetent generals who massacred many, was vile toward Native Americans, stripping many of them of their lands, executing them, overseed concentration camps, and advocated for ethnic cleansing. How great is your Honest Abe after hearing all of that? Trump is easily way better. George Washington, any early American president, did absolutely atrocious things that would paint them evil by today's standards. Slave owner, reckless, barbaric, our saint, child RT, started bloodbaths and battles, ruthless killing under his own hands, unethical relationships with mistresses, child sex trafficking, you name it. Almost any early American president has a rap sheet like this. Washington was guilty of most of these things. Jimmy Carter, remarkably bad president and an even worse ex-president. Not only was he an anti-American traitor till the very end, he allowed Iran to fall to the Ayatollahs. There was the taking of the hostages in the Iran embassy, the collapse of Afghanistan, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, record levels of inflation combined with unemployment. Actively lobbying against Ronald Reagan, actively lobbying countries to oppose George H.W. Bush in defense of Kuwait, actively standing for Hamas, Kamala Harris, the North Korean regime, Joe Biden, and the leftist openly anti-American traitor regime. He loved dictators. Some accuse Carter of treason in relation to the Iran hostage crisis and collusion between the Reagan campaign and Iran. One might say giving up U.S. control of the Panama Canal was treason. Listen, Carter wasn't just bad. He was a walking national embarrassment who handed America's keys to our enemies. Start with the canal, surrendering Panama like it was yesterday's gum. That wasn't diplomacy. That was gutting our Navy's backyard, letting Torrijos, who Carter himself called a dictator, pocket the tolls while China now eyes it up. Hostage crisis? He bailed Tehran with secret pallets of cash, then cried when the Iranians laughed in his face. Meanwhile, Reagan swoops in day one and they all walk free. That October surprise conspiracy? Carter's team probably leaked it to kill his re-election, but hey, the hostages still hate him. Afghanistan? Not just letting the Soviets roll in, he armed the Mujahideen with Stinger missiles we never got back. Whoops. Bin Laden says thank you. Inflation 21%, interest rates 19%, he told Americans put on a sweater, while his wife, Rosalind, wore cashmere. Then, post-presidency? This guy flies to North Korea with Madeleine Albright, shakes hands with Kim Jong-il, calls him vigorous, then comes home and begs Congress to send rice. Hamas? He wrote a book, Palestine, Peace Not Apartheid, that basically says Israel should vanish. That's not pro-peace, that's pro-terror. Cuba? He begged Castro to release Elian Gonzalez back into communist claws, called the boys Miami family kidnappers. And the Biden love? He literally said Joe was the most ethical president we've ever had. That's not praise, that's a cry for help. Carter even wrote Castro letters begging him to endorse Clinton in '96, dictators as political consultants. Why? Because he hated Reagan so bad he'd rather take foreign policy advice from Fidel. And don't get me started on his Habitat for Humanity PR stunt like nailing boards fixes selling out the free world. Treason? Maybe not in a courtroom, but in spirit, absolutely. Every handshake with tyrants, every plea for Hamas, every dollar we paid Tehran, it's Carter's blood on our hands. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I've already covered why they are so evil. Openly anti-American, sabotaged us constantly, opened Americans up to harms, threats, and risks of all kinds while putting us last and selling us out-talking lists and lists of treason, sedition, fraud, corruption, lies, evil, violence, suffering, and so much more with them. You can find such info linked and on my channel at No More Eps America. Franklin D. Roosevelt, he promoted socialist ideology, introduced the idea of deficit spending, which means spending money that the U.S. does not have. He put Japanese Americans in camps because of their heritage. His solution was to implement the socialist fascist economic system under which Americans suffered. His National Recovery Act gave him virtually unlimited dictatorial powers over American business and industry. He persuaded Congress to provide him a power to which Stalin and Mussolini proudly possessed, the power to nationalize people's gold. He idolized the ideology of Karl Marx, Joseph Stalin, and Benito Mussolini's fascist system in Italy. Harry Truman, one of the worst. During his 8-year presidency, he dropped atomic bombs on Japanese civilians, brought about the creation of Israel, entered the Korean War, began the Cold War, and created the CIA. Truman got played by the French, and the result was the Vietnam War. Had he not died, he would have interned Japanese American civilians just like FDR. Richard Nixon. Nixon is not a terrible choice. Nixon expanded the war in Vietnam knowing we couldn't win. He was a paranoid maniac who saw Jews, blacks, the press, gays, women, etc. as his enemies, and tried to stop their civil liberties whenever he could. He nearly ordered nuclear attacks while drunk, the crimes against humanity in Cambodia, Laos, ignored the Bangladesh genocide, Watergate. Try watching the Nixon in his own words documentary. Theodore Roosevelt, one of the better choices. However, yet, some of the worst parts of the Philippine-American War were due to him, such as the Balangiga Massacre. He also tried to declare said war over in 1902, when in reality it would not end until 1911. A lot of the blood from this war is on Teddy's hands. Teddy was incredibly racist. He also made the Chinese Exclusion Act permanent and barred Japanese people from entering the U.S., the gunboat diplomacy, which is basically just chaotic imperialism. One example is when Venezuela captured the British ship the Queen. There were also abuses against German citizens and their property in Venezuela, and for that reason, Britain, Germany, and Italy decided to interfere against Venezuela. The Venezuelan president Cipriano Castro thought that TR would intervene because of the Monroe Doctrine, but the Monroe Doctrine only goes against colonization, not any other military actions. But, well, TR didn't care and interfered anyways. He threatened to send Admiral George Dewey in the U.S. fleet to help Venezuela. He also claimed Germany attempted colonization, but there was no proof. The European nations lifted the blockade in 1903. The people sell off the Treaty of Portsmouth as a positive because it ended the Russo-Japanese War, but it also contributed to the existence of Imperial Japan. It forced the Russian government to recognize the Korean Peninsula as a Japanese colony and gave the Japanese government control over Port Arthur, the Liaodong Peninsula, and half of Sakhalin. In fact, the Treaty of Portsmouth was the point where the Empire of Japan started to be seriously considered as a world power. The only possible argument is that there may have not been a better alternative. Roosevelt was also opposed to separation of powers and said that the Constitution can be broken if it is for the greater good. Overall, whilst I do acknowledge some of TR's positives, I don't think he's as good of a president as most claim he is. Especially not better than Donald Trump. Herbert Hoover, one of the best choices, is still unremarkable to me. He was remarkable and a great answer, but Trump is like an Avenger compared. Trump did more good for the average American than any president ever in his first 100 days in both terms. Hoover is unremarkable in this sense. He has a slow response to the Great Depression, which worsened it in the longer run. He supported policies that deepened our economic woes, and he tanked global trade, worsening the economic collapse. He also used federal troops to violently disperse the Bonus Army, a group of desperate veterans which crushed his public image. Dwight Eisenhower. Maybe Eisenhower did the right thing, maybe not. We don't know what would have happened had the Korean War continued. Be that as it may, we do know that the Kim dynasty, more vicious and more dangerous than any other in the world, is still in power. Eisenhower was probably the most anti-Israel of all American presidents. The United States maintained an embargo against shipping arms to the Middle East, which had been introduced by President Truman. However, in Truman's day, the Soviet Union had not yet become a supporter of the Arab cause. The embargo became a one-sided weapon against Israel once Czechoslovakia stopped selling arms to Israel. But his most an anti-Israel act was joining with the USSR to force Israel to abandon its gains after its victory in the Sinai Campaign of 1956. He thus established a tradition for the world to follow. Israel would not be allowed to benefit from its military victories after it defeated the enemies who had threatened it. Eisenhower forced Israel to withdraw immediately and unilaterally. At the same time that the Sinai campaign was taking place, Hungary overthrew its communist government. The Soviet Union invaded Hungary and re-established a communist regime there. Eisenhower, who had overthrown Mossadegh because he felt Iran might be too friendly to the Soviet Union, who had canceled elections in Vietnam, and who had overthrown an elected government in Guatemala, said nothing and thus tacitly supported the invasion of Hungary just at the moment that he was actively working with the USSR against Israel. President Eisenhower signed a bill introducing the words "under God" into the Pledge of Allegiance, thus initiating a struggle about church-state relations that has grown worse with time and has split the country. This brings us back to who Ahmadinejad should be grateful to Eisenhower. After 2 centuries of separation of church and state in America, Eisenhower turned in the other direction. Did his move have echoes all over the world? Did it lead Iranian religious fundamentalists to look forward to the day when religion would be reestablished in Iran? The influence couldn't have been direct. But ever since Eisenhower's day, religion has been a growing influence in the United States, and therefore in the world. What more could Ahmadinejad ask for? William Howard Taft, essentially a moderate Roosevelt, one of the better choices. He was an unremarkable president and was a better Chief Justice than Commander-in-Chief. Taft often failed to distinguish between good and bad trusts, and he also opened up protected preservations to drilling in Alaska. He lacked the skill and know-how to lead effectively, alienating his key supporters. He could not lead and lacked skill, any leadership ability really whatsoever. He was out of touch with the progressive era's need for reform. The guy just didn't have a knack for the job. James A. Garfield, his presidency was so short before he was ultimately assassinated that it is hard to say exactly the president he was. He played into the stalwart faction of the Republican Party, especially for appointing cronies to cushy government jobs which reeked of patronage. His administration didn't tackle the rampant political corruption head-on, despite his campaign promises to do so. He ticked off workers and farmers by backing the gold standard. He was inexperienced in national leadership, and it showed. James Madison led the U.S. into the disastrous War of 1812. It was poorly planned, underfunded, and let American cities fall to the British. His push for war ignored strong opposition from New England, alienating a chunk of the country. His administration fumbled military strategy. His economic policies, like the Embargo Act, crippled trade and upset merchants. He didn't do much to address slavery being a slaveholder himself. He also left frontier settlers vulnerable due to being slow to react. John F. Kennedy, JFK, was pro-Israel, sent tanks, jets, millions in aid, ignored the USS Liberty even after the attack. The guy literally told Dimona, "We trust you, no inspections." The only time he pushed back was a letter asking Ben-Gurion for a single tour of Dimona. Ben-Gurion quit instead of answering. Then Eshkol gave the tour and JFK dropped it. Assassination theories? Sure, but Israel wasn't even on the list. CIA, Mafia, Cubans, Soviets, even LBJ got blamed before the Zionists. FBI files declassified last year. Hoover had no Zionist angle, just domestic Reds. If he didn't touch the wall, he claimed JFK was a Democrat, sure, but nothing like these modern-day Democrats who are an entirely different political party, pretty much. Tax cuts, balanced budget, pay-as-you-go, Cold War hawk, space race alpha. Ask not what your country can do. That's conservative scripture now, flipped on its head by today's woke squad. And Israel? He was their best friend, sent Hawk missiles, Phantom jets, $71 million in aid, ignored the Liberty massacre after they bombed it for an hour. Only time he pushed was asking for one look inside Dimona. Ben-Gurion resigned instead. Eshkol showed him a basement tunnel and JFK signed off. Assassination! CIA, Mafia, Cubans, Soviets, Israel never even made the short list in the FBI files. He touched the Zionist wall? Nah, he polished it. He won. Escalated U.S. involvement in Vietnam with more advisors. 2. Approved failed Bay of Pigs invasion against Cuba. 3. Misjudged M-Cuban Missile Crisis, risking global conflict. 4. Delayed civil rights action, moving slowly on equality. 5. Authorized wiretapping of Martin Luther King Jr. 6. Supported covert CIA operations destabilizing foreign governments. 7. Ignored warnings about organized crime and political alliances. 8. Mishandled Berlin crisis, leading to walls construction. 9. Over-relied on military advisors, sidelining diplomatic solutions. 10. Expanded nuclear arsenal, fueling Cold War arms race. 11. Failed to pass comprehensive civil rights legislation. 12. Mismanaged early space program, trailing Soviet advances. 13. Neglected domestic poverty issues in favor of foreign policy. 14. Approved risky assassination plots against foreign leaders. 15. Miscommunicated during Vienna summit, emboldening Khrushchev. 16. Allowed escalation of anti-communist paranoia domestically. 17. Underestimated Southern resistance to desegregation efforts. 18. Relied heavily on family loyalists for key appointments. 19. Struggled with economic policy, facing recession concerns. 20. Authorized invasive COINTELPRO tactics against activists. In retrospect, he spent his 35 months in the White House stumbling from crisis to fiasco. He came into office and okayed the Bay of Pigs invasion. Then he went to a Vienna summit conference and got his clock cleaned by Khrushchev. That led to, among other things, the Cuban Missile Crisis and a whiff of nuclear apocalypse. Looming over it all is the American descent into Vietnam. Then there's the tax cuts thing as well. Ronald Reagan. Reagan was terrible and a remarkably bad president, unlike the left like to falsely claim about Trump. It is unbelievable Reagan did not end up in go-to-jail prison. Astoundingly bad at everything. He supported dictators like Pinochet and others who were worse. He caused a lot of Westerners to lose human rights. He sold tons of narcotics to fund weapons to South American guerrillas trying to topple democratically elected governments. He did a lot of nasty business with Iran, all of this, while doing a war on drugs. He refused to do anything about the crack cocaine epidemic. He made it harder for universities from finding a cure against AIDS. Made sure scientists and institutions lost any funding. He tanked the U.S. economy. Ulysses S. Grant, 1. Whiskey ring scandal exposed corruption. 2. Appointed unqualified friends to key posts. 3. Credit mobilier fraud thrived under him. 4. His policies triggered the Panic of 1873. 5. Failed to stop widespread government graft. 6. Black Friday crash tied to his associates. 7. Reconstruction enforcement was inconsistent. 8. Ignored Southern attacks on black citizens. 9. Indian peace policy harmed native tribes. 10. Mishandled treaties, worsening native relations. Signed Comstock Act, curbing free speech. 12. Military moves like Cuba were sloppy. 13. Vetoed inflation bill, hurting farmers. 14. Foreign policy lacked clear success. 15. Mishandled growing labor unrest. 16. Tax policies favored the rich. 17. Ignored civil service reform needs. 18. Virginia's affair risked war with Spain. 19. Let monopolies dominate key industries. 20. Passive leadership enabled corruption. Thomas Jefferson, 1. Owned slaves despite advocating for freedom. 2. Ignored Native American treaty rights. 3. Embargo Act of 1807 crippled trade. 4. Failed to prepare for British attacks. 5. Expanded executive power unchecked. 6. Ignored Supreme Court in Marbury case. 7. Supported French Revolution's excesses. 8. Alien and Sedition Acts sparked controversy. 9. Neglected naval defenses, inviting raids. 10. Louisiana Purchase raised constitutional questions. 11. Poorly managed national debt reduction. 12. Ignored growing sectional tensions. 13. Favored agrarian policies over commerce. 14. Mishandled Burr conspiracy fallout. 15. Weak foreign policy emboldened enemies. 16. Undermined judicial independence repeatedly. 17. Failed to address slavery's expansion. 18. Ignored urban labor struggles. 19. Alienated Federalist political opponents. 20. Left economy stagnant with embargoes. Bill Clinton, Bill went from fiasco to fiasco, helped to usher the downfall of America. The scandals, handling of genocide, vile towards gays, etc. 1. Signed 1996 Anti-Terrorism Act, criticized for surveillance overreach. 2. Impeached 1998 for perjury, obstruction in Lewinsky scandal. 3. Had affair with Monica Lewinsky, causing major scandal. 4. Faced sexual misconduct allegations from Paula Jones, others. 5. Settled Jones' lawsuit for $850,000, no admission of guilt. 6. Mishandled 1993 Waco siege, 76 deaths. 7. Signed 1994 crime bill, linked to mass incarceration. 8. Signed Defense of Marriage Act, opposed same-sex marriage. 9. Pushed NAFTA, criticized for job losses. 10. Failed to act on Rwanda genocide, thousands died. 11. Bombed Sudan, Afghanistan in 1998, questioned as distraction from scandal. Deregulated banks via Graham-Leach-Bliley Act, tied to 2008 crisis. 13. Ignored Al-Qaeda warnings, criticized post-9/11. 14. Pardoned controversial figures like Mark Rich in 2001. Accused of shady 1996 campaign fundraising. 16. Vetoed welfare reform twice, seen as flip-flopping. 17. Weak response to USS Cole bombing in 2000. 18. Expanded prison system, harsh sentencing laws. 19. Linked to Whitewater scandal, questionable land deals. 20. Faced cronyism. James Buchanan, consistently ranked among the worst U.S. presidents, deepened national divisions as a slaveholder who staunchly supported slavery. His mishandling of the Dred Scott decision inflamed abolitionists, while his backing of the pro-slavery Lecompton Constitution escalated tensions. His ineffective response to the Panic of 1857 crippled the economy, offering no relief. Buchanan's aggressive yet fruitless foreign policy, including failed attempts to purchase Cuba and meddling in Mexico, humiliated the nation. He neglected infrastructure, ignored Native American treaty violations, appointed incompetent cabinet members, and failed to reform the judiciary. Prioritizing Southern interests over national unity, he underestimated secessionist movements, allowed unchecked slavery expansion, and remained idle as Southern states prepared to secede, leaving Lincoln with a nation on the brink of collapse. All early U.S. presidents, including William Henry Harrison, were complicit in a reprehensible system marked by slavery, genocide, war crimes, and sexual violence, including and child reflecting the era's systemic brutality. Harrison, despite his brief presidency, was a terrible leader due to his ownership of slaves, support for slavery's expansion, advocacy for the Indian Removal Act, leadership in military campaigns against Native Americans like the Battle of Tippecanoe, negotiation of exploitative treaties, enforcement of native displacement policies, promotion of settler colonialism, failure to address slavery's moral crisis, neglect of native sovereignty, upholding of oppressive systems, lack of economic policy, reckless inaugural address leading to his death, poor judgment in prioritizing image, absence of legislative legacy, failure to unify the Whig Party, questionable cabinet appointments, neglect of banking reform, representation of elite interests, and embodiment of systemic injustices through inaction. Gerald Ford. 1. Pardoned Nixon, undermining justice. 2. Weak on economic recovery after recession. 3. Failed to address energy crisis effectively. 4. Inflation soared under his watch. 5. Vetoed 66 bills, stalling progress. 6. Clumsy leadership lacked public trust. 7. Continued Vietnam War support too long. 8. Ignored urban decay and poverty. 9. Appointed controversial figures like Rumsfeld. 10. Mishandled swine flu vaccine rollout. 11. Foreign policy lacked clear direction. 12. Didn't tackle rising crime rates. 13. Struggled to unify divided nation. 14. Weak response to Soviet expansionism. 15. Cut social programs amid inequality. 16. Misjudged public mood on trust. 17. Slow to address unemployment spikes. 18. Lacked vision for long-term growth. 19. Mishandled Helsinki Accords criticism. 20. Failed to inspire national confidence.